Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very pleasant day to our lecturer Dr. Nur Aisyah binti Abu Shah and to our beloved friends. So today our group will be present about phytoremediations as our topic for group assignment for code subject Bio 611 Plant Physiology. Before that, let we introduce ourselves as group members, which consists of 3 persons. Firstly is So, as we can see here is the table of contents of our ideas for these presentations, which consists of introductions, type of phytoremediations, applications, conclusions, and reference. Now, we will move on to our introductions. Let's go.
Over the past decades, the concentrations of heavy metals in the atmosphere has risen enormously with the growth of industrializations and urbanizations, which has created major issues around the world. Cadmium, mercury, lead, arsenic, zinc, copper and nickels, and chromium are among the typical heavy metals. These heavy metals come from natural or anthropogenic sources. Heavy metals are non-degradable by either biological or physical mechanisms and exist for a long periods of time in the soil, that creating a long-term environmental hazard. Therefore, remediations are alternative steps that must be taken to prevent heavy metals from penetrating the terrestrial marines and marine environments and to minimize the pollution of the earth. There is a few types of phytoremediations, and in this slide we will explain about the phytoextractions, phytostabilizations, and phytovolatilizations. These types of phytoremediations differs in terms of its specific functions, mechanisms, type of plants required, and also its advantages amongst of the other types of phytoremediations process.
One of the parts in the phytoremediation known as phytoextractions. Phytoextractions is the use of plant to remove soil or water contaminants and translocate and retain such contaminants in their biomass above the ground. Plant characteristics for them to undergo phytoextractions are: it must be high tolerance to the toxic effects of heavy metals. Secondly, it must be high extraction ability with accumulation of high levels of heavy metals in above ground parts. Thirdly is fast growing with high biomass production, and lastly have abundant and extensive root systems. Examples of plants that suitable for phytoextractions are Pteris vittata and Phytolacca americana. For phytoextraction mechanisms, first step is heavy metals that contaminated will be mobilized into rhizosphere. After that, those heavy metals will be uptake to plant roots via root hairs. How this contamination was uptake is by the absorption of water from the soil that mix with the polluted elements. Then, those heavy metals ion will move from the roots to aerial segments of plants by translocation process. And finally, phytoextractions will result in sequestration and compartmentations of heavy metals ions inside plant tissues. This process will reduce concentrations of heavy metals from aluminum silicate matrix or non-suitable for soil to carbon-based matrix that's suitable for plants. Hyperaccumulated plants is the key factor to the effectiveness of phytoextraction process. It is a plant species that absent in phytotoxicity symptoms that able to accumulate very high levels of heavy metals in their parts above the ground. Currently, there are more than 450 plant species that have been described as metal hyperaccumulators, including family of Lamiaceae, Astraceae, and Brassicaceae. Advantages of phytoextractions are: this process is environmental friendly. It is also a permanent solution for elimination from contaminated soil of heavy metals. This will make it suitable for industrial uses development.
Okay, so what is phytostabilization? Phytostabilization is the use of metal-tolerant plant species to immobilize heavy metal below ground and decrease their bioavailability, thereby preventing their migration into the ecosystem and reducing the likelihood of metal entering to the food chain. Not all plants are suitable to do this phytoremediation method. Plants that have this characteristic only may be doing this method. The first one is the plant should be tolerant to the heavy metal condition because we are facing heavy metal as the contaminant. The plant should be also have dense rooting system because the root need to uptake the heavy metal to the shoot. Plant should be able to produce a large amount of biomass and grow fast to timely establish a vegetation cover in the specific site. The plant cover should also be easy to maintain under field condition to prevent unwanted problems to happen. We have the example of suitable plants that can use for this method, which is Festuca rubra, or known as red festu. This plant can tolerate many habitats and climates. It is best adapted to well-drained soil in cool and temperate climate, and that's why this plant suitable for this method. So let's see the mechanism of this method. Firstly, the mobility of the heavy metal will be reduced to prevent further dispersal of the contaminant. Second step is the solubility of the heavy metal in soil will be reduced and minimize leaching to groundwater to prevent further contamination. The third step is the contaminant will move from the soil into the root to be stabilized, and lastly, the undesirable contaminant which has been stabilized will be uptake to the shoot and will be released to atmosphere through evapotranspiration during phytovolatilization. After that, let's see the advantages of phytostabilization. First one is the disposal of hazardous biomass are not required when used phytostabilization. It also can increase the organic matter content and essential nutrient in soil and improve physical, chemical and biological properties. It also will enhance the soil structure and prevent the soil from wind erosion. And of course, this is cost-efficient method when compared to other technologies equipment to perform remediation technique.
Phytovoltaizations is the phytoremediation approach that uses plants to extract the contaminants from the soil, turn these toxic elements into less toxic volatile forms, and then release them into the atmosphere through the leaves or foliage systems via the transpiration process. In order to perform phytovolatilizations, there is some requirements of plants that need to be fulfilled. The plant need to be a good volatilizer and also highly resistant to the pathogens and pests. There is some example plants that provided from the slide, and the first picture is Typa latifolia. The second picture is Arabidopsis thalians and also Nicotiana tabacum. Next, we'll move with the mechanism of phytovolatilizations, where it consists of two phytovolatilizations, that is direct and indirect. Based on the picture that provided, direct photovolatilization is mostly occur on the surface of the plant, while the indirect phytovolatilization is mostly occur at the bottoms or roots of the plants. Direct phytovolatilizations are often differ from transpirations, as many compounds that are phytovolatilized are moderately, such as cutin in the epidermis or the suberin in the woody dermal tissue. Direct phytovolatilizations requires the plant to uptake, translocate and volatile the compound. So, volatilizations of compound produced or transformed by the plants are not considered to be directly phytovolatilized. For indirect phytovolatilizations, it increases in volatile contaminant flux from the subsurface resulting from plant's root activity. Apparently, plants move vast quantities of water that is globally around 62,000 km per cubic per year and concurrently explore large volume of soil, and it causes profound changes in the subsurface of chemical feed and transport. Moving to the second point, the activities of plant roots can increase the flux of volatile contaminant from the subsurface through the following mechanism. First is by lowering the water tables. Second is advections with the glass fluxes caused by the dual water table fluctuations. And the third one is increasing the soil permeability. And lastly is chemicals transport via hydraulic redistributions. The advantages of phytovolatilizations compared with other phytoremediation strategy is that heavy metal contaminants are removed from the sites and dispersed as gaseous compounds without any need for plant harvesting and disposal. However, as a remedial strategy, a phytovolatilization does not remove the pollutants completely. The pollutants are still in the plant environments. It's only transfer pollutant from the soil to the atmosphere where the toxic volatile compounds will contaminate the ambient air. Moreover, they may be redeposited to the soil by precipitations. Thus, a risk assessment is required before it's applied in the field.
Now we will proceed to the applications of phytoremediation, especially here in Malaysia. Malaysia is known as a developing country in terms of its industrial and agricultural sectors. So, phytoremediation is necessary to make sure that pollution in this country can be controlled. As we can see from this table 1, these are some examples that show studies of phytoremediation using pollutant samples from contaminated sites. For examples, pollution of heavy metals in aquaculture wastewater from fish pond here in Semanggol, Perak. They use plant species like Ecornia crassipes and also Piscia stratiotis to undergo phytoremediations.
As shown in Table 2 is the application of phytoremediation which has been stimulated in laboratory. For example, the application that being stimulated including heavy metal from soil which can be used plant species such as Centella asiatica and heavy metal from sewage sludge which can performed by Autosiphon staminus or Acacia mengium.
So, as a conclusion, phytoremediation is trusted method for pollutant removals. It has been shown to be a promising technique with strong public support for the remediation of heavy metal polluted soil and shows a number of benefits compared to other psychochemical techniques.
For the recommendation, we suggest that further studies are required to identify promising plant species and optimal phytoremediation appropriate environmental conditions. Further efforts are also needed to make this technique relevant to the field scale. And last but not least, for highly efficient and exhaustive phytoremediation in the future, a combination of different methods including genetic engineering is important in order to make this method more efficient in the future. So, I think that's all from us explaining about phytoremediation. Thank you very much.
So that is all from us. Thank you for your attention and have a nice day ahead.